Hello everyone, welcome back to a new list video. In this one I'm gonna talk about my 25 honorable mentions out of 2024. This is a list with those 25 albums that were just this close to make it into the top 50, but there's just so many albums and I can't put them all in my top 50. So here's 25 albums that I do think are worth your time and you might even find them more enjoyable than me. So with that being said, let's get into this. At number 25 is gonna be mh-Ziq Puppy with Carousel from Hell. In just 19 minutes of material, we got a non-stop adrenaline rush on an album that reminds me a combination of Machine Girl and Government Plates era Death Grips. While I really like the way it starts, the more and more it goes, the less engaged I end up being. The potential is definitely there, and overall it's a pretty cool and energetic digital hardcore and industrial hip-hop mini album. It's just that there's so little to it, so hopefully we're going to get something more fulfilling and even more polished in the future. Next up I'm gonna mention Ulver with the album Liminal Animals. The latest era of Ulver with the synth-pop throwback is an era in which I was expecting more, but I'm personally disappointed by what they've put out recently. Out of this new era of Ulver, I would consider this to be their best project so far. It might not say a lot on its own, since I don't consider this amongst the best stuff the group has put out, but it seems that with Liminal Animals, they sort of find their footing. They don't sound too much like the Depeche Mode knockoff, and it feels a bit more polished and well crafted. Especially the instrumental Nocturne 2 was a pleasant surprise. So yeah, kinda digging this new Ulver album. Next we go into Brazilian funk with DJ Anderson do Pareço with the album Queridão. I think that's how it's pronounced, but I'm not really sure. This is a very interesting approach on the whole trending sound of Brazilian funk. Instead of being upfront and unhinged, this is a really laid-back album focusing more on creating a dark atmosphere and being minimal with its instrumentation and rap deliveries. There is nothing really that distracting to the mix, so everything stands out in its own way. From the odd sampling, the subtle bass and percussion and dark ambience, it's a refreshing approach on a sound that really shows that can offer more than just wacky overproduced stuff, which can be appealing in their own way for sure, but Queridão feels one of a kind. If it wasn't as one-dimensional and had fewer tracks being more fully developed, then we would talk about an album that could easily land in my top 50. Next up is Candy with the album It's Inside You. While Candy's new work is another album that I don't find to be particularly impressive, their bold combinations of metalcore with multiple styles of electronic music is something that cannot go unnoticed. From nu metal to industrial and digital hardcore, this album is even more versatile than their last one and has so much going on to it in the span of just 30 minutes. They have a really strong and refreshing formula, so hopefully it will expand into some even greater ideas in the future. Next up we have the collaboration of John Wiz and John Potts with Violent Semi-Abstract. John Wiz collaborates once again with Joe Potts of Airwave fame to create a very bizarre and out there noisy sound collage album. John Wiz keeps on with his crazy experimental collaborations in recent years, and this might be one of the more intriguing works he's put out in this more recent era of experimentations. Only 30 minutes of material with lots of drone and many different sounds colliding together that make for an unsettling experience. Up next is Duran 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 with Supernatural Beast City. Mostly known for some outlandish breakcore releases, the new album tones things down a little bit and goes into some more spacey directions with jungle braids and a few elements of IDM. It's nice to see this change of pace, and some of the approaches over here make for some really cool results. Nothing all that amazing, but it's certainly an overlooked electronic release that is pretty polished and is worth of more attention in my opinion. Then we have this album by mh-Ziq, The Vault. Even in their jam sessions, you can sense some great chemistry and talent from this up-and-coming post-rock band. In a really short period of time, mh-Ziq have turned heads and become one of the most talked about names in this new era of post-rock. While me personally, I haven't been blown away with what I've heard so far, I found this lengthy improvisation album to offer some of the most interesting ideas from the band. Even with the rough phone recording, the sound keeps the dissonant atmosphere ranging from blissful melodic segments to total chaos. This album is a really cool idea and it's nice to get this side of the band as the results end up being better than what I'd expect. Then it's this split from Deathbed Tapes by F-Slayer front Gay Death and Straight Panic, Proud Boys. This is one of the rawest and most sinister power electronics you're going to listen to all year. With pure filth and anger, this triple split is a massive smash against gay oppression. I'm not a fan of all the directions this project is going for, as for a triple split it can get a bit messy, but at its best it is such a sickening and brutal power electronics project that anyone who is a fan of the genre could most likely find something interesting out of this. Up next is gonna be Bring Me the Horizon with Post-Human Next Gen. To see myself being excited for the new Bring Me the Horizon album in 2024 is something that I would not expect, but the EP Post-Human Survival Horror 4 years back blew me away. The more accessible directions of alternative metal alongside electronic and industrial elements worked in their favor big time, and this became one of my most anticipated albums of the year. But the thing is that I was expecting even more out of it. It's still a bold and adventurous album, nicely produced, with anthemic choruses, but also overstays its welcome, and the multiple interludes don't really add much to the album. Even with all that, this still remains their most well put together full-length album, but with a bar being set this high with survival horror, I would expect something way more outstanding with Next Gen. Then we go into death metal with Undeath and the album More Insane. I got into this not really having any expectations, as this was my introduction to Undeath, but this is a pretty solid melodic death metal album with some really nice riffs. Starts off pretty strong with some cool ideas, but the second half doesn't really keep the momentum going, despite it being a pretty short album. Still, a standard formula of death metal that works really fine for what it is. Number 15 is the new album of Squarepusher, Dostro Time. If it wasn't for the 3-part Acreon, 3 acoustic ballads whose inclusion I don't really understand, this would become one of the most significant Squarepusher releases in recent memory. In many aspects this is a strong return to form, keeping the essence of what has made drill and bass and acid core have such a pivotal role in the 90s. A really good throwback to some classic old school sounds with a more bold and adventurous release, but somewhat inconsistent in terms of overall quality. Then we have this new album of Joy Valence and Bray with No Hands. What a fun and catchy release by this hip-hop duo, a really nice throwback to sounds of the 90s and early 2000s, from dance music, drum and bass breaks, and boom bap. This is a pumped up and energetic hip-hop release with witty lyrics and some very imaginative tunes. Kinda inconsistent at times and there could have been more to it at its short runtime, but when it hits, this album hits hard. Then it's Grass by m-Ziq. Grass shows a return to form, embracing a classic formula of IDM alongside drill and bass, and the result is a solid 90s throwback when IDM was at its peak, and it makes for one of the more consistent releases in m-Ziq's catalog. With a lot of weird drum patterns and a constant usage of atmospheric synth layers that actually make for some of the most standout moments in the album, Grass is a release that might not hold up amazingly as a whole, but it's decent enough to make for a very intriguing electronic release for 2024. Then we have the debut album of Richie, previously known as a member of Injury Reserve, in which he showcased immense talent as one of the defining names in the experimental hip-hop scene. Richie makes his solo debut, which is a more standard approach of hip-hop, but still has enough experimental elements to it in order to make it stand out in the patch. Don't really expect anything that much exceptional when it comes to production and compositions, but the sampling is still decent, the rapping is fine, and the music in general gets the job done. I suggest you to give it a shot. Then we have this crazy collaboration of mid-beat Manifesto and m-Ziq with the album Extinct. Out of all the collaborations in recent memory from m-Ziq, this has to be one of the most surprising and coolest ones. Teaming up with breakbeat producer mid-beat Manifesto, these are two powerful tracks with abstract beat loops and the usually relentless fury that we get from the harsh noise soundscapes of m-Ziq. This becomes a power noise mayhem that is a nice eclectic addition to both of the artists' catalogs, even if the second track Burner loses its momentum a bit after the more powerful introduction Flaka. This becomes one of my stronger recommendations when it comes to the newest m-Ziq material. This collaboration works really well. And now getting into the top 10 of my honorable mentions, we start on with Chatpile and Cool World. After a very strong debut, Cool World shows Chatpile to embrace even further their vast array of influences, making for an even more diverse release. From sludge metal to post-punk, hardcore and noise rock, Chatpile once again show how they can really nail everything they attempt and create such a cold and dissonant album that sounds bleak and aggressive. Another pretty decent effort from them, making Cool World another entry in their catalog that shows great potential and creativity. Then it's the new album of Judas Priest, Invincible Shield. I mean, if their previous work, Firepower, didn't manage to impress you with a band's ability to rock this hard after all of those years, Invincible Shield is an even more mind-blowing achievement. How can Rob Halford's voice sound this good, just like he would sing back in the 80s, is just beyond me. Obviously, the most significant part of the album is how they managed to sound this good after 50 years since their debut. But even the songwriting over here is not all that forgettable. Sure, it's a standard approach of heavy metal that doesn't reinvent the wheel, but there's still some really catchy riffs over here, and I would consider this to be one of the best albums Judas Priest have put out in a really long time. Next up is this collaboration of The Body and mh-Ziq with Orchards of a Futile Heaven. The Body is a duo known for multiple eccentric collaborations over the years, and this year's collaboration with mh-Ziq is another strong addition to the list, going once again to a more industrial-centered sound with minimal drumming and noise patterns. mh-Ziq was an artist that I wasn't familiar with prior to this, but her ethereal voice works nicely in contrast with the heavy noise feedback that surrounds big portions of this album. A nice blend of sounds and another really dissonant and dark release added to the Body's catalog, possibly the best work they've put out this decade so far. Next up is the new album of Einstürzende Neubauten, Rampen. Anyone who is familiar with the German pioneers of industrial will be really pleased with their new album. While still having the more art pop elements, Rampen has some of the most solid industrial sounds the band has put out in a while, making this the best album they've put out in a long while. Kinda longer than what I would prefer, but still some nice results out there that sound fresh and exceptional to this day. Next up is the debut album of Quadrak, The Horrible Dissonance of Oblivion. This is an impressive dissonant black and death metal album done by this one-man band from Greece. After a really promising EP back in 2021, Quadrat delivered strong with a debut full-length album filled with great riffs, pretty decent structures and vocal performances, and an album filled to the brim with a heavy dark atmosphere and also, as you can guess by the title, dissonance. If you're looking for a black metal release out of 2024 and haven't heard this one yet, give it a shot, as I consider this to be one of the most standout metal releases of this year. We're at the top 5 and we have Ali X with Girl with No Face. This is one of the most defining synth-pop albums to come out this year, giving Ali X the attention she deserves, with some of the catchiest tunes the genre had to offer this year. Girls with No Face captures the essence of synth-pop, Italo-disco and new wave in an immaculate way. It feels like it came straight from the 80s, but has its own character and personality to make it stand out rather than just feel like recycled ideas. Pretty cool and fun release in my opinion. Next up is Kelly Moran with Moves in the Field. This is just a minimal piano work that manages with its minimalism to be captivating and hypnotic. One of the most beautiful and meditative releases to come out this year in my opinion. I got into this not really knowing what to expect, but this is quite a special modern classical release that showcases the strengths of post-minimalism and how much you can do and evoke to the listener with just simple piano compositions. Next up is Seidan with Visual Kill, The Blossoming of Psychotic Depravity. I saw the album making the rounds and I got into it not really knowing what to expect. I was immensely surprised with how many solid riffs there are to this thing. This is peak melodic black metal right here. The production is raw and filthy, but the overall feeling is triumphant, anthemic and uplifting. Pleasant surprise for me considering how much I ended up enjoying this album, but yeah, pretty solid and short USBM release. At number 2 is Sega Bodega with Dennis. Prior to this, I only knew Sega Bodega as a name, so this was my introduction, and I'm certainly intrigued. Pop and R&B with lots of ethereal and futuristic production elements with glitch and heavily manipulated vocals. On some tracks the album is absolutely spectacular, others didn't impress me as much, but overall it's a really cool blend of multiple electronic sounds and styles. And finally, my strongest honorable mention is gonna be Dave Phillips with Nothing's Wrong. This is just one track that goes for 35 minutes, and it's a wild ride, consisting of chaotic music on grid alongside lots of noisy elements and sounds from crossed out vocals to weird collage passages that sound completely unsettling. Pretty familiar in that disturbing world of ominous soundscapes with other words that you would expect from Dave Phillips. The consistency of certain sounds returning and the non-stop curiosity on what's gonna throw on you at any given moment makes this such an engaging and suspenseful track from start to finish. And so these are for me the 25 honorable mentions of 2024. Let me know what you think of those albums if you have heard of them down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.